Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and I'm excited and intrigued to talk to this week's guest, who at a young age is already a best-selling author who's motivating youth and young adults to become positive leaders. Let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll jump into what I know is going to be a fun and fascinating conversation. Jeremy Bhandari has a unique path. He's been a sports fanatic since he was a toddler, and he first followed the usual path of getting a college degree and entering the corporate world. And granted, his first job out of college was pretty dang cool. He was a researcher for ESPN, where he created original content that was used on SportsCenter, The Paul Feinbaum Show, SEC Now, and other studio productions. But after just a few short years there, he decided he was going to write his own ticket for a while before getting pigeonholed into a particular career path. And so he left to pursue his love of storytelling, which has also been a passion since childhood. And he recently released his #1 bestseller, Trust the Grind: How World-Class Athletes Got to the Top. The book has been recognized by the National Alliance for Youth Sport, and Jeremy is now using it as a way to connect with young adults who want to get to the top. Aside from writing, Jeremy enjoys spending time with loved ones, working out, and listening to music by artists like Drake, Kanye West, Andre 3000, Nas, and Amy Winehouse. All right, welcome to the show, Jeremy. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So I want to talk about the book, but before we jump into that, I have to ask you the crucial question I ask of all our guests. What does positive leadership mean to you, Jeremy? What's your definition of it?
Yeah, to me, when I think of positive leadership, I just think of an individual who is leading by example, right? They're utilizing their time. They're going about their occupation, their life the right way. And what that means is they're setting goals, they're disciplined, and they're ultimately taking genuine interest in others. I think that's the most slept on or neglected trait that is so beneficial from a leader standpoint, because if I'm around someone who's taking interest in me and helping me when I'm struggling or answering the questions that I might have, I know I can trust that individual. And if we can trust an individual, we can do well and we can succeed together. So I think leading by example, being the hardest working person in the room, but ultimately taking interest in others and helping those around them.
I love that. Yeah, it's that whole notion of sort of lifting others up, right? Which is what we are all about here on the Positive Leadership Movement. I love it. So tell us about this book, because it sounds really inspiring. It's been picked up, in different places. It's a #1 bestseller on Amazon these days. What inspired you to write the book, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think storytelling, like you mentioned in the introduction, has always been something prevalent in my existence since a young age. I was even, in grade school, we would get 30 minutes or so to have, it would be called free time. And what that meant was kids would draw, kids would read. And anytime we had this free time in 3rd grade or so, I would just grab a sheet of paper and just start scripting a story, usually something about, I was really interested in baseball at the time. So it was usually a story. I would draw out the box score and everyone's name and come up with a plot. And it would always be something funny, and something funny would happen at the end of the game. And the team losing would always make an epic comeback or something crazy, something silly at that age. And then as I got older, I realized I would always get asked who were, if you could have dinner with 5 people, who would it be? And my answers were always musicians or actors or athletes. And what I drew from that was hey, I really enjoy people who express themselves in their field. I enjoy people who express themselves maybe physically on the diamond, on the court in sport, or on the microphone, or on set in Hollywood. I was like, I love people who are genuine to themselves and expressing who they are to the fullest, whether that's with a camera in front of them or not. Um, and so I was like, man, that must mean something, because you don't really know, you don't really choose what you love in life. You just love things for whatever reason. And so I was like, I was super attracted to people who express themselves. So I knew ultimately deep down, I was like, I want to express myself. How do I do it? How do I actually go about this? I don't want to just, you know, kind of exist the 9 to 5 life and clock in, clock out. I was like, I want to have a voice. I want to have a voice. So as I got to college, I was like pretty ahead as terms of credits go during my senior year. So I was able to be super flexible. So with that, I remember going on the website at my college, UMass, and finding out like, hey, is there anything or any courses I can take that are interesting, or just something better than a typical gen ed. I didn't want to just take something that I wasn't passionate about, right? So
Right.
I remember going online and finding like this sports blogging company, this sports blogging website, and it counted as internship credit. So it was like 3 to 4 articles a week. You attend weekly meetings, you help out socially, and whatever the corporation needed. So I was like, this is cool. This is better than a class, and it counted just as much as any course did towards my
That
degree.
does
So
sound much more interesting than a class, I
yeah.
agree.
And so I grew up, like I said, I grew up liking actors, singers, athletes. So I was like, cool, I'll write about sports. I've always enjoyed watching, and just gives me something else to do, and it holds me more accountable. So long story short, I wrote about 100 articles my senior year for this website. And when it was time to ultimately graduate, I was like, well, I need a job. And lucky enough, I, just was applying one day or perusing the internet and saw an ESPN researcher job opening. And I was like, well, I have a lot of content already recorded and published. Maybe they'll give me a shot. I know I'm young, 21 years old or whatever, but I just gave it a shot, clicked it, didn't know anyone in the company, just did the typical application. And one thing led to another, had an interview, had another interview, and 5 or 6 phone interviews, about 2 in-person evaluations. And I was given the job. And it was like this dream job coming out of school, but it was based out of North Carolina. So I was someone who lived in Massachusetts my whole life. And with that, I was like, this is a great opportunity for me. I'm not going to pass up on it. So I packed my bags, drove about 13 hours from Massachusetts to North Carolina, and began working. I found a random roommate online, got an apartment, and that was that. So at ESPN, I would create content, studio production, event production, meaning like TVs, live games, ESPN.com articles, whoever needed help, just assisting any facet that I possibly could. And I was like, during this time, obviously, when you move from Massachusetts, live there your whole life, really foreign territory.
Yeah.
So like I had I didn't have a family, I didn't have friends around. So during my free time, had a lot of time to think and find out what do I actually want to do? What do I want to be remembered as, so to say? So I started thinking and was like, I really like sports, and I haven't, at this point, obviously I'm not writing about sports anymore. So I'm like, man, I did like having a voice. I did like creating content around sports. I did like, documenting things. And so I just started thinking. I would spend time in Starbucks and get my coffee and bring my laptop and just sit there and think, like, how can I have a voice again, as a professional? I said, I love sports. And then I started, like, all of a sudden something kind of hit me. It was like a success habit blueprint for kids. What if we did that? What if, like, I literally started thinking, like, what would Jeremy have wanted when he was 10, 12, 13 years old? That would have maybe assisted him a little bit, maybe pushed him in the right direction, maybe given him a step over the competition, so to say. And I thought, it would be cool. I know so much about sports. I want to use this in a beneficial manner. I want to use this to inspire. To me, it's all about helping and assisting. I think that ultimately makes you feel the best, because all we have at the end of the day are our emotions. So I want to have the best possible, the most uplifting, most positive emotions possible. So with that, I know that helping others gives me that sense, gives me that feeling of abundance and just overall gratification. So I was like, you know what? this would be so cool. I know I'm going to use the sports knowledge, all this that I got cooped up years and years of it in the most beneficial way possible that I can think of at this time. And that was ultimately to speak with some world-class athletes and just find out how they got to the top, not only in sports, but for anyone in any walk, that they can ultimately add to their path. Like ultimately add, what productive tendencies are they doing on a daily basis? What habits have they picked up that others aren't doing? And that was the whole message is, hey, we're going to have readers who aren't going to the MLB or NBA, but everyone out there wants to be happy. Everyone out there wants to be successful. So can we just talk about that and try to, get everyone moving forward?
I love it. What a wonderful story, because wow, it just shows you, I mean, you have such wisdom and awareness, self-awareness at a young age. For a lot of people listening to this show, and I'll count myself in this group, by the way, I mean, the fact that you're thinking about, how can I have a voice, and our emotions are really what we have, and recognizing that helping others actually makes us feel really good. These are things that, at least in my experience, at least in my world, most people don't really discover those things until they're a little bit older and they've had a few, bad experiences along the way, a few good experiences, but they've essentially been around the block a few times, right?
Right.
And so I just love that you have this acute awareness of not only your passions, but your desire to help others. The fact that it will actually help you, it's going to help them, but it's going to help you too. And this idea that you wanted to have a voice, I just love that. And just to sort of put you on the spot maybe a little bit, did you ever have any self-doubt that, like, I'm so young, like, is it okay for me to have a voice in the world? Like, should I be putting my voice out there? Did you ever have any self-doubt, any little voice in your head telling you you're not old enough or you're not experienced enough to have a quote unquote voice out there?
Yeah, I think anyone who is asked that question in any profession, and if they answer it no, then they're lying. I think we all are faced with self-doubt. I'm gonna be honest. I think it's a human, it's programmed in us subconsciously to not always, we can come across as confident, we can believe in ourselves, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be little something. The great people are able to block that out as soon as it ultimately jumps into their mind. But there is that voice that will be prevalent, that will be living in our heads. So yeah, there was times where that voice would sink in and be like, you've never written a book before, you've never interviewed people, what makes you think you can do it now all of a sudden? Because you've had more time to think, because you're in a foreign location and you've thought about more how you want to be remembered and how you want to best utilize your time. And ultimately, when those ideas or statements came into my mind, what my answer to that voice was like, you got to start somewhere. It doesn't matter if you don't have experience in anything. Like, everyone who's ever done something didn't have experience when they first started out. And the only way to get better is by putting energy towards that said discipline. So I can't, if I'm going to jump into something new, which was interviewing people, which was scripting a manuscript, a book, ultimately, like, there's no other better time to start than now. So if it's something that was programmed in my head, how come I kept going to Starbucks and thinking about it? There's a reason for that, I think, at least. I'm one of those people who thinks that if it's a recurring thought, then it means something. I got to do something with it. What is that voice saying? Why are they telling me to interview athletes and not talk about sports, but talk about setting goals and confidence and stuff like that? So I just knew, I was like, you know what, this must mean something. So I'm going to go after it. If I fail, I fail. But the only way to know is by trying.
I love it. Such wisdom. So you had the two competing voices, but you listened to the one that was encouraging you, right? And as you said, hey, if I have this recurring thought, if I'm spending so much time thinking about this, I'm probably meant to do something about it.
Right. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So what are the biggest takeaways that you have from, putting this book together and this whole literary project, if you like?
Yeah. I mean, the process itself, I mean, the biggest takeaways, I guess, for the audience, the best to hear would be, like I said, my goal was to shy away from stats, shy away from accolades, and just get these people talking about their lives and their livelihoods in a completely different light. Like let's
Mhm.
shed positivity. Let's discuss things that are beneficial to anyone in any walk of life. Like I said, not everyone's going to the professional leagues in sports.
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't. So part of the process was me learning. Like, how can I learn too? Like when I interview you, I'm curious as to how you got to where you're at, so I can
Mhm.
instill it. And one great example, and it starts the book, is setting goals. It's I got to interview just Chipper Jones, who's like a Hall of Fame baseball player. He's a complete legend. But one thing he said, we talked about you got to set daily goals, you got to set long-term goals, and he had his season goals, his projections for how he wanted to do that year. But ultimately, he told me, and this is something, it's such a great analogy for life. He said, each time I show up to the ballpark, I'm just trying to be a tough at bat for the pitcher, right? So what
Mhm.
that ultimately means is if you focus in on the present moment at all times, you're going to succeed down the line. You don't have to worry what 3 months are going to look like 5 years out, 10 years out. If you're presently focused, in his case, being a tough at bat every time he goes into that batter's box, then you're going to succeed. And I think that's something that's so often overlooked. We start looking around and we think 5 years, oh, I got to graduate college here and I got to have this job, this. And it's like, well, why don't you just take a deep breath and be here? Because if you're not here, that means you're somewhere else. And if you're not
Mhm.
present, you're ultimately not going to become the person you were supposed to be. So I started just like, even just hearing like a simple baseball analogy like that, I started taking that really seriously. And if I ever found my mind wandering or something, I would just take a deep breath as if I'm standing in a batter's box, as if I'm getting ready for a pitch. Because if you watch baseball, if you watch an at bat, before a lot of the hitters, before they step up to the plate, they'll take a deep, long breath. So that's ultimately what they're doing is, I'm here. You see that in
Mhm.
sports, you see that maybe people before they give a big speech, deep breath, then they go. And I found
Right.
myself doing that more and more and more. And I thought that was so cool to have a professional athlete, a Hall of Fame athlete, touch on kind of being present. Like, I'm gonna have long-term goals. Yes, have a plan, have an idea, but be present. And that was one of my
Mhm.
favorite aspects.
I love that. And this whole notion of being present, it comes up again and again on this show. I mean, whether it's coming from you as a young leader who's just written a book and you have this whole sports background, or whether it's coming from, I think a couple of weeks ago, I had on an organizational consultant who has 40 years of experience, and he's talking about the same thing in organizations. This whole idea of being present is just permeating everything that we do these days. And it is so incredibly important because there are just so many things vying to distract us from what it is that we're actually doing. And sort of, as you said, taking that deep breath and really kind of appreciating, like, I'm here right now, so
Right.
let me do the best that I can. And let me also, which I think you just in sharing with us here today have demonstrated in your own life, is also taking that deep breath to say, why am I here? Like, why am
Right.
I doing what I'm doing? And if I'm not enjoying it, or it doesn't seem to be serving me well, then perhaps I need to be doing something different. And what might that be? Right. And just even being present to that voice. Because when you were talking earlier about, we talked about those two voices, right? The one, the self-doubt, but that other voice that kept kind of saying to you, no, you really need to do this. There's something here. You need to explore this. That voice that encourages you is often much um, softer and kind of shyer than the
Right.
the doubt voice, right? The doubt voice will come in and just like blast you and will talk to you the whole time if you let it. But the only way the other voice comes in is if we actually become really present and really take those deep breaths and really become more aware of the whole thing. So I love that you're talking about that whole notion of being present, and that, yes, I mean, here it came from this top baseball player in telling you that, right? And so no matter who you are, no matter what you're working on right now, no matter what your goals are, be present. It is a good
Right.
practice for all of us.
Right. Yeah.
and
That's
and
why
one that we really do need to practice, because it's too easy with our phones and our devices and everything that happens around us. It's too easy not to be present and miss it all.
I like firmly, I'm so glad you kind of went into detail on that, because I actually really believe that it's never been more difficult than now. I know with technology advancements and everything. I swear it's never been more difficult than now to really be successful because of the amount of distractions. I think there's no way in the history of mankind that we've ever been faced with this amount of distractions. I mean, I get notifications every Sunday of how much screen time I've used and all this stuff. And it's like, it's so easy to just go online and then obviously you get caught up and go on social media and all this stuff. So it's like, that's why it's so important. I'll even find myself like tapping myself to remind myself, hey, be here right now. You got to focus. Like you can't be anywhere else. Like seriously, I started doing that. Like I would tap myself and take a deep breath, like I said. And I just think it's so important when in this internet digital age, it's like you really, really got to focus in and realize when your mind's drifting, realize when your focus isn't where it should be, and really zone in on the present.
Yeah. I mean, whatever works for you, tap yourself, have some kind of cue, but have a rubber band around your wrist if you need to, whatever works, right? As that cue, as that reminder. I love it. So tell me, because I love the title of your book, right? The title of your book is Trust the Grind, How World-Class Athletes Got to the Top. This is a title that is really compelling to me, and I am clearly not youth. I'm clearly not a young adult. I'm definitely in my middle age. But I like it because, over my lifetime, I've kind of come to appreciate that, the grind, like when we say the grind, sometimes that can have a negative connotation, like, oh my gosh, it's such a grind, right? But I don't see those words that way, because over time, I realize that if I do just, show up, be present, just keep showing up, just keep doing it, that you do get the results, right? But I'm curious because, there's so many people out there that say, oh, well, the young generation today, they don't want a grind. They just want it handed to them. And so I'm curious in terms of how, certainly the book has obviously been well received. It's a #1 bestseller. It's been recognized, by the National Alliance of Youth Sport. So clearly it's been well received, but how do you ever find that there's some people are sort of like, wait, a grind? Like young people are like, a grind? What do you mean a grind? Like, tell me a little bit about that. What was the reaction to that in using that language and just letting people know up front, like, there's a grind to this, people. If you want to get to the top, you've got to do some work here.
Yeah, that's a cool question. I've never been asked that. I think ultimately, like I said, the whole reasoning for the project was to really like, hey, what would Jeremy have wanted when he was 12 years old? Like that could have helped him, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, I know we touched on that word is kind of powerful, grind, like work hard,
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I kind of wish I can only speak on personal experience. I kind of wish I had that in my ear when I was younger, saying like, hey, this is a grind. Like nothing's free, nothing's handed to you. You got to work. If you want something, you got to work for it. And, we all know that inherently, but sometimes we kind of need that up front to understand. And I just want to teach kids, like, you can really achieve anything you want, and you can live a happy life, but there comes with sacrifice. Like all the people that I interviewed in this book, they're like the quote unquote 1%ers because they were willing to do what only 1% of people were willing to do. So if you want to have this luxurious life and be world class at whatever you do, you're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to have to grind, quote unquote, grind when others aren't. And that's just part of it. That's what makes them stand out. And ultimately, that's what gives them that benefit at the end of the day when they come home from an opportunity that they were put in because they worked so hard when others weren't. That feeling of just sacrifice, of discipline, of grinding, of setting the goal, of eating the right foods, that feeling is so powerful. And like I said, it all boils down to emotions. So if your emotions and your vibrations are high, and that stems from putting in the work. So I just wanted to teach kids, like, you can do anything. I don't think you should ever set limits on what you can do. Like when you're 3, 4, or 5 years old, they get asked in school, like, what do you want to be? I want to be an astronaut. I want to be this, a baseball MLB player. It's like, you can do that. Even when you turn 16, 17, that can still happen, but it comes with a price. It comes with setting goals. No one just accidentally gets there. And, the book is written in really, like, it's not a preachy way. And it's more of, I'm standing next to you and saying, hey, we got this. Let's develop a routine, a weekly routine. Let's set the goal. let's clean it up in the kitchen, let's get after it in the gym, and let's put our time and energy towards what we really want to do in order to live the happiest and most successful life that we possibly can, and not what someone else signed up for, and not what our parents think we should do. What do we personally want to do?
Yeah, I love that you're putting it out there. I love that you're just so upfront with this, like, you need the grind. And here again is where, you know, our digital world makes this even more difficult, right? Because you go on Facebook, you go on LinkedIn, you go on Instagram or TikTok or whatever you're on these days, and you only see the highlight reel, you know, and we think that people are somehow overnight successes. What we don't see is the grind. Nobody's posting their grind, you know? So if I post, you know, I'm off on some nice vacation, well, you know, in ye olden days when you went places and did things with people, right? That we'll hopefully sometimes do again after we get past this crazy pandemic. But, you know, people might look at that and be like, God, she's on vacation. Like, look at her on vacation. It's like, well, you didn't see the grind I put in to be able to be on this vacation. Like, I'm not posting that I've been working 20 hours yesterday and 18 hours the day before. And, you know, all the things that I do every day, my routine, the things that, you know, some of the habits I'm sure you talk about in this book, right? In terms of consistency and all the rest of it. It's like, nobody sees that stuff. They just see the success. And so this is where I think that whole, you know, disconnect happens too. It's like people think they can just do it overnight. Like, oh, I want to be an MLB player, so I'll just do it. Well, yeah, you can do it. But to your point, guess what? Are you ready to get up at 4:00 in the morning and do reps and do this and do the strength training and do it every day? And, you know, no matter what is happening, you have to eat, you know, the right food, even on Thanksgiving, even at Christmas, right? Like all these things that it takes to be that world-class person. That's sort of the stuff that gets lost. So it's wonderful that you are just putting it out there and helping these kids at a young age realize, like, okay, I can get there, but I need to understand what the reality of that path actually is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome because ultimately, as humans, as we get older, we all know the answers, right? We all, like, if you want to get fit, like, we know you have to eat the right foods and go to the gym and work out and stay physically active. Like, we know that.
It ain't hard, right? It's not,
right. And it's like, if we want to get better at in any industry, in any discipline, we just got to put time towards it. We just got to study it. We got to find the people who are great at it, you know, and learn from them. And what are their habits? Like, we all know, but sometimes it's easy, like we said, to get distracted, to fall off, to not get back on our path. And, you know, touching on my book, you know, you asked, you know, what are some of the major takeaways? And another thing that I really appreciated was I spoke to Jason Kidd, who's a Hall of Fame basketball player. And we were going through, you know, just the grind, so to say, like the thousands of shots a day, the dribbling with 2 balls, watching film of his opponents, all the basketball practices that ultimately help you propel your game. But another thing he said, and then I had a journal, like I was recommended to start journaling early on in my NBA career. And I'm like, you know, it's one thing to talk, you know, I'm like starstruck kind of talking to a guy that I grew up watching. And now he's talking about, like, oh, hey, no, you have to write things down. Like, I would document when I was playing at a high level, who were the people I was surrounding myself with? What foods was I eating? What was my practice routine like? Was I napping? What content was I absorbing? You know, was it mindless stuff or beneficial? And he says, so then when I'm having a bad game or a tough stretch or not getting the desired results I want on the court, I'm able to go back and reflect and say, oh, these are the people I was around when my game was at its highest. Oh, this is my practice schedule. I was napping at this time. Oh, I was eating these foods, you know? So all of a sudden, like the next week, I swear, I pick up a journal and I'm like, just writing stuff down. Like, you know, you're writing down your goals. You're writing down the people that make you happy. And ultimately, it feels good to reveal more about yourself. And my major takeaway from that entire discussion with him was like, man, it's like, if you wanted to cook a new recipe, or a new meal, it's like going into the kitchen and going there blindfolded and not bringing a recipe. If you say you want to cook a new meal and you didn't have a recipe to read, it'd be pretty difficult, right? You say you want to make this exquisite meal and there's no recipe. And that's kind of how life is if you're not documenting who you are and what you want to be and who you want to be around and what you ultimately want to obtain. And that's like, I found that so powerful from like a Hall of Fame basketball player who's talking about the thousands of shots, but he's also harping on this journaling aspect of like documenting what you're doing. And that's something, like I said, the biggest thing was like, how can we teach kids in any walk of life? And I highly, highly recommend picking up a journal, writing down, you know, your goals, writing down the people you want to be around, writing down, you know, when you close your eyes and like you touched on a vacation, like what's that glorious vacation look like to you? What does the desired car look like? Just write it down. It'll feel good. And write down, like I said, the people you want to be around. Like, I know for me, I'll write down the friends I have, the family, the loved ones, and why are they beneficial to you in your walk? And all of a sudden you're writing down all, because sometimes it's silly. It's this person makes me laugh. That's why I text them all the time, or, you know, whatever it is. Like this girl takes interest in me. That's why, you know, it's just silly stuff. Like it makes you feel good and it gives you a better understanding of who you are and what you want to accomplish. So it's cool to enter a conversation. I'm learning about self-discipline, but now I'm walking away with a beneficial habit and something that I can ultimately better myself with is by journaling.
I love that. And very powerful, right? Because it sounds like he also used it a little bit to spot patterns, right? Like if I'm playing well, what was going on in my world at the time? And can I, you know, can I replicate that again? You know, or if I wasn't playing well, what was going on there? Was I surrounding myself with negative Nellies at the time? Or did I get off my diet? Was I trying a new diet? Like these things where sometimes we're floating through life and we're doing things, but we're not even connecting the dots. Like, oh, my performance has gone down, but I don't know why. Like, just keep going, you know, expect it to get better. But if you had been doing something like you're talking about, where we have more awareness, we can look back and see like, oh, that's interesting. You know, maybe it's not causality. We can't prove that, but we can certainly experiment a little bit and say, hey, I was doing these things when things are going well. Maybe if I brought those back in, it might help me. Let's see, right? And allow yourself to experiment to try to create the optimal place for yourself, right?
The optimal place. I love that. And it's funny because there's something magical to really scripting. And we found out, I just was doing research for the book and I found out that, you know, you can think about your goals and that's great, but if you think about them and write them down, so all of a sudden you write down whatever your, you know, present ambition is, and then you're reading it, you're not only activating by saying a goal out loud, you're activating your right hemisphere. I might be twisting these up, but by actually writing it down, you're activating both your right and left hemisphere. So you're tapping into a side of your brain that otherwise wouldn't have been activated had you not written down a goal. So it's like, there's really no negative to spending, let's say 5 minutes in the morning when after you eat breakfast and writing down what you want to do today, who you want to be. What do I need to do? Who do I need to reach out to? Who makes me happy that I want to reach out to? What am I doing ultimately while I'm during my waking hours to get closer towards my goal? And it's like just simple stuff. Like I'll make sure to follow up with this person, or, you know, make sure to write 1,000 words if you're writing a book or something, like just whatever. Like that takes 5 minutes. And all of a sudden that makes a light year difference. If you do that every day, imagine that for every day, like for months on end, you're going to know exactly, not only are you going to get close to your goals, but you're going to know so much more about yourself just by sitting down there with a pen and paper and just finding out, okay, who am I? Because you're the one who ultimately has to process the hand. And it sounds silly, but if you're just given a blank sheet and you're saying, what do you want to do? Some people don't even really know. It's like a lot of people say, I want to be happy and successful and a millionaire. Like, well, what does the dream look like to you? Let's write it down first. And once you have an idea, it becomes just a reverse engineering process. It's like, okay, who do you know? Like, you want to get great at science, or, okay, let's spend time with a science teacher. Let's watch videos on science. Like, you know what it takes, but just ultimately identifying that desire, identifying that aim so we can bring it into fruition.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a ton of research that shows when you write those goals down, you're so much more likely to achieve them than people who don't. So, you know, it's what Jeremy is saying is completely backed by lots and lots of research as well. So I am curious. I mean, no offense, but you know, you're just a kid who, yes, you had a cool job at ESPN, but you're reaching out to Jason Kidd to get an interview. Like, how did you get these interviews with these people? Was it like connections through people who knew people, or did you just send out, you know, the cold email and hope for the how'd you get these people, these big names to, you know, sit down with you and essentially kind of be somewhat vulnerable and kind of unpack their lives with you.
Yeah, I think it started with like I said, I'm taking the principles that I know, which was like if you want to accomplish something, you have to have a clear cut desire, you have to have a clear cut intention as to what
Mm-hmm.
exactly you're trying to achieve. So even my emails, it was all through digital marketing, meaning like it was all through email.
Mm-hmm.
And I had such like for any athlete, it was I knew exactly whether it was self confidence, self discipline, power of positive thinking, whatever subject matter I wanted to discuss with them. That was labeled high. You know, I have this book that I'm going to be working with Mango Publishing on. Um, I want to talk to you, your client, or you about self discipline. Here's the questions where I'm looking to inspire the youth. It would only take 15, 20 minutes, you know, and then I have like, if I'm talking about goal setting, or like I said, the writing stuff down, I'll include like I want to talk to you about this because I know you've had a tremendous illustrious career, and I want to teach kids the power of saying your goals out loud. And I read in an interview in 1997 that you stated your goals out loud, and ultimately 2 years later you accomplished what you said. And I really want to teach kids the power of stating your goals out loud, because a couple things happen. Number one, you get more familiar with your aim, with your ambition when you're physically saying it, and that you have a clearer, more clear understanding. But number two, whoever you're discussing it with, whether that's a parent, a reporter, whoever, a teacher, now all of a sudden you're more accountable. And when you're more
Mm-hmm.
accountable, they're more likely to say in 2 weeks, whoever you discuss with, they're going to follow up with you. Hey, remember you said you were going to do this? Remember you said you were going to get an A in this class, or you were going to be able to do 50 push-ups by the end of the week, like whatever it is. Like, that inherently forces you to focus in, like this person's gonna, they're gonna ask about it. I have to be ready. So when you come with all this research, you come with all this back, you say it's for a book, and hey, I just need 15 at the end, you're putting a request like, hey, I just need to ask them a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to say no when you're doing something good. And I think the problem with sports media, I don't know how passionate you are about sports, but it's a lot of like just negativity on these athletes if they make one mistake. And my whole thing was
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. I literally just want to use your path to inspire. You've done some tremendous things in your craft. Let's just teach people. Let's teach. I think, like I said, it feels good to help and it feels good to teach. So I said,
Yeah.
let's just do that. So I think, it's when you're creating a narrative to inspire the youth and you're utilizing their story in the most positive, beneficial manner, it's kind of hard to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you are very smart about how you framed all that and how you went about it. And you did your research on each person too.
Yeah.
So that, when people, I get pitched a lot, right? And so when it comes in, you just know if it's generic versus if someone actually took the time to maybe just, even 5 minutes, go to your website and know what you're about. And then
Right.
even 2 lines that are somewhat personal, it
Right.
makes a huge difference.
Huge.
And I
Yeah.
ain't no Jason Kidd, but that's true of all of us, right? If people personalize and let them know, like, hey, I've done my research, this is for a good cause, are you interested? It goes a long way. So very, very, very smart approach. All right,
Thank
one last question, but I mean, I could talk to you all day, but we got to be mindful of the time here. You've mentioned this a few times, about people living happy and successful lives, right? And so, based on all the research that you have and based on your short time on the earth, but your long wisdom that you have, what are your tips? I mean, what can we all do to live a happy and successful life?
Well, like I said, it always boils down to emotions. That's how we determine if we're happy, if we're feeling positive, if we're high on that vibration scale. So with that said, how do we raise that? How do we make sure we're not going to be happy all the time? I'm not going to just, act like that's possible. But how do we kind of, for the lion's share of our energy or on our time, how do we make sure we're feeling good? And to me, it comes down to, like I said, a lot of the writing stuff, and you got to wake up with a plan and a purpose. I think if you don't have a plan or you don't have a reason, if you don't have a goal to strive for, it's kind of hard to be happy because you don't know what you're going after. It's like ripping open a treasure map, and there's no X. There's no like desired place to go. It's just, all right, well, we can go here, we can go around here, but
Mhm.
there's no real landing spot. But whatever, we'll just wake up. And that's what a lot of people do. They just wake up, they clock in, they clock out, and ultimately 50 years go by. And that's why you see a lot of people on their deathbeds. Man, I wish I tried this, or I should have went after this. It's never about like something little or something small that you worry about. It's always about not taking that chance, right? So I think, how do we avoid getting in that situation? We set aside time by ourselves. One thing that a recurring theme that kept coming up with the athletes was like, they all set aside time to mentally project positive outcomes before they stepped into their arena. One of the hockey players said, I would, 30 minutes on game day, visualize in my bed, me making big plays, visualize me making a pass and my teammates scoring, visualizing the goalie's weakness so I know where to shoot it. So when I go out there, I've already seen it in my head. I've already played it out. It's like second nature. And that's something we all need to do, is setting aside that 10, 15 minutes in the morning, visualizing who we want to be, writing down what we want to achieve. Because we can't just wake up. We can't just clock in, clock out. We have to know who our soul is at the end of the day. Who is that spirit? Do we really know? Are we aligned with who our spirit is and says and thinks we are? So the best way to go about that is by just identifying. It's like I said, the recipe thing. Identify the ingredients to your life. Identify what the meal looks like. Like, identify who you are, write down who you are, write down who you want to be. And there's nothing you can lose by learning more about yourself. All you're doing when you're writing stuff down, when you're taking time out of your mornings to visualize, all you're doing is learning more about yourself, which is the most beneficial thing you can do. It's not selfish. It's the most beneficial thing you can do while your time is here. So if you want to become the best version of yourself, learn about yourself. And that's what I encourage all these kids. Like, you can set goals, you can do all this stuff and all these beautiful things we're talking about. Before you get into that, who are you? What do you want to be? Who do you want to be around? And ultimately, what do you want to be remembered for?
Well, powerful stuff, Jeremy. I wish I had your book when I wish 12-year-old Alex had your book. Yeah, listen up, everyone. I mean, he's right. Self-awareness is not selfishness. And,
Right.
if
That's
we
awesome.
want to be better leaders, we have to be self-aware, because we cannot lead if we don't know who we are. So I love it. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, inspirational, motivational, and just so full of wisdom. That's very powerful. Thank you. We barely scratched the surface. I have about 20 other questions I want to ask you, but we got to be mindful of time. So I know our listeners are going to want more of you. How can they get in touch with you? How can they connect with you further? And more importantly, how can they get your book?
Yeah, well, first off, Alex, I want to just say like how thankful I am for coming on this platform. And it's just so nice to, like I said, another individual inspiring and doing good things with their time. So it means a lot that you're looking to push people forward. But as far as I'm on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Jeremy the Grind. So that's JeremyThegrind. Link up with me on there, ask questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always available. So, and when it comes to the book, just go on Amazon, type in Trust the Grind. It'll come right up. It's been endorsed by some of the athletes in the project. And just check it out. Let me know your thoughts on it. And just ultimately, like I said, the biggest thing, is really take this time. If you're going to get anything out of this, the one thing I want you to do is just find more about yourself. Take that 5 minutes in the morning, jot down who you are and what you want to become, and ultimately get up and go after it.
Wise words. Thank you. On that, we are going to close because that's just too powerful. So thank you, Jeremy, for being on the show. And thank you, of course, to all our listeners for joining us for this episode. If you have positive leadership stories to share, or you have questions on this week's topic, or you want to connect with Jeremy and you weren't fast enough to write down where he's at and find the book, you can connect to him through me. And all of that you can do by shooting me a note at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com. I always love to hear from you and connect with you. All right, that's it for this week. This is Alex Bratty signing out and thanking you for being part of the positive leadership movement and inspiring me to do what I do every single day.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.